Hi, I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And welcome to ReDIScover, a space where we celebrate the childlike qualities that make up the essence of who we are while engaging with the world around us, both authentically and imaginatively.
Nothing is off the table here, and we talk a little bit...
or a lot.
About, well, everything.
Around here, we're always rediscovering, sharing empowering stories, and connecting our hearts and minds with every facet of life.
While we, of course, talk about the real stuff,
we invite you to be a part of the conversation as we broaden our perspectives, release limitations,
and grow to create our most joyful and fulfilling lives together.
So come along with us as we rediscover all the best parts of you
and bring a little bit of magic into your day.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And welcome back to this week's episode of ReDIScover. Today's episode is a continuation of the part 1 we released last Tuesday. We are doing a ReDIScover audio guide of the Disneyland Resort. This month of April, you are getting weekly ReDIScover episodes, which is a little bit different than our bi-weekly schedule, but we have broken up our 2 main topics of Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure into 2 episodes each. That's 4 episodes of ReDIScover in the month of April. Very exciting. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, we'll link it in the show notes so you can catch up there. And then we are going to get started and pick up where we left off and continue on to part 2 of our ReDIScover Disneyland audio guide. Enjoy. So we should move on to Frontierland because that has a little bit more of what we want to talk about.
I like Frontierland at Disneyland so much better than Frontierland at the Magic Kingdom. It's actually my least favorite land at the Magic Kingdom, but I find myself very drawn to Disneyland's Frontierland. And I think it's because of this sort of like Southwest vibe, and the whole Rancho del Zocalo area is it's just beautiful.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting parts about Frontierland at Disneyland is the location. It's connected to New Orleans Square, Adventureland, and Fantasyland. Well, actually, probably 4, probably now Star Wars, which I don't know yet. But it's smack dab in the middle of the park, which is strange for us Walt Disney World people because Frontierland is out in the boondocks at Walt Disney World.
It's the tumbleweeds.
Big Thunder Mountain is right in the middle of the park. I feel like this version of Thunder Mountain is it's fun. The queue is a lot more condensed, I would say. Like it feels a lot smaller. But once you get on there, it's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And it's a good time. And your views are so different here. Just because you're in the middle of everything. But I agree. I love that Rancho del Zocalo area.
It's just this beautiful area, this courtyard with this fountain, and it's decorated for Dia de los Muertos. And like just the light in the morning there is so pretty. It just comes in through the like stone archways and everything. And I'm so like thinking about the lighting at Disneyland, like just the ways that natural light is part of the story at Disneyland is so magnificent to me. And that to me stands out as the area that I just feel drawn to just visually in Frontierland. And it's right along the rivers of America. So you still have that like we have at Walt Disney World, except at Disneyland, the rivers of America are also where Fantasmic takes place. So not only do we have that big showboat, that you see at the end of Fantasmic here at Walt Disney World as well, but the pirate ship, it's called the Columbia, that you see, you can actually go on during the day and take a trip down the rivers of America, also is incorporated into the storyline of Fantasmic. So that's really cool to see how all of that transforms at night. And people just sit along the rivers of America. I don't know if it's like the colors of Frontierland, the way it just sort of like melts into New Orleans Square. It's just so enjoyable to just walk around.
Yeah, it's lovely. And I think it is interesting having Fantasmic in Frontierland because as Walt Disney World people, we're used to having it in a big old stadium seating type area at Hollywood Studios. But Fantasmic is smack dab in the middle of the Magic Kingdom style park. And it's standing room only. And it's just on the rivers of America, and they have the Mark Twain with all the characters on it at the end. So I think it adds a layer to Frontierland and a liveliness that you don't really have at the Walt Disney World one. One other thing that I'm thinking of too is they have canoes that actually go around the rivers of America too, which I weirdly loved. And they have mixed reviews because like you're rowing a boat at Disneyland.
Yeah,
like, I don't want to work out at Disneyland, but like it's a really fun way to see the park. I think it makes you feel like you're kind of on a camping trip and canoeing through. Yeah, it's really fun. I always would force my friends to go on with me and they'd be like, I don't want to go, but I loved it. So no, I would go again.
Well, if we ever take ReDIScover on a Disneyland trip, we'll do the canoes.
Good. I want to go.
I think they're so fun. Those are the kinds of immersive experiences that take Disneyland to the next level for me. Being on the riverboat and like the little compartment with like the velvet, upholstered furniture. It could be something out of a storybook. And I just love all of those little details that have been preserved and upheld. I think that makes all the difference in the world, especially if you are someone who is a return guest. Like maybe on your first trip, you won't notice those things, but for the people who go back over and over again, those things become the little golden threads that string all those experiences together and make them beautiful. So I love it. I feel like the logical next place to go is Fantasyland.
I agree. I think we should probably just mention they did open Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland. I feel like I can't speak to it because I have not. Well, I was there, I guess, but I was not feeling well. So I don't really remember it. But they have, Rise of the Resistance. They have Smuggler's Run. It's similar to Hollywood Studios. Yeah. Kind of copy paste. Yeah.
It feels smaller. It probably is smaller. As a Walt Disney World local, I have Galaxy's Edge at Hollywood Studios. And I was like, okay, I know this is the same attractions and pretty much the same land. I'm not going to waste my very precious time at Disneyland doing this. But yeah, it feels very similar. It feels, if anything, a little bit smaller, but still like, it's phenomenal. They did an amazing job.
And if you want to hear about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, just listen to our Hollywood Studios episode because it's probably very similar.
Yes, it definitely is. I would like to take us through Fantasy Fair before we get into Fantasyland. And for those of you who are confused, understandable. Fantasy Fair was kind of an expansion onto Fantasyland that was done several years ago, kind of like how New Fantasyland at Magic Kingdom, we still call it New Fantasyland, even though it's 10 years old this year.
Oh no, I feel old.
Here is the 10-year anniversary of New Fantasyland. Do we feel old yet? Yes. But Fantasy Fair is a smaller area. There is an outdoor amphitheater where there were these smaller little tales, kind of like what New Fantasyland was going to have. There was going to be like a story time with several of the different princesses that would rotate out. And this is what they've kind of conceptualized and brought to life in Fantasy Fair. Whereas at Walt Disney World, we have one really immersive story time and it's Enchanted Tales with Belle. Here, there are no animatronics, but there are actors and puppeteers and princesses. And so there's a Tangled one with Rapunzel and Flynn Rider. There's Beauty and the Beast. I think it was just those two.
I think it's just those two.
But they'll do like little reenactments and you'll get to meet and greet with the characters at the end. And then across the way from that is the Royal Hall, which is like the Princess Fairy Tale Hall of Disneyland. Except the fun part about the Disneyland one is you don't really know who you're going to get. At Walt Disney World, again, being very tourist driven, they kind of have to tell you who you're going to see because guests who are coming on a once in a lifetime trip and really want to make sure they see Princess Tiana or Cinderella, they want to know what they're getting. Whereas at Disneyland, they can kind of float around and, whoever's here that day is who's here that day. So I've met anyone from Mulan to Ariel, Snow White, pretty much every princess. It's just really pretty there. It feels very like a medieval courtyard. And there's a little kiosk outside the theater that I love. I believe it's called Maurice's Treats, right?
I think so.
Belle's father, at it again, the real MVP, Papa, with his really neat inventions, has invented this magical thing called a bagel twist. And there are sweet ones and savory ones. I love the savory cheddar garlic one. It is so delicious. And that is my go-to mid-morning. I still am sort of in breakfast mode, but I know I just need a carb to get me through the day. I'll head over there for one of those.
Yeah, those are really good. Fantasyland at Disneyland is very different.
Yes.
It is storybook European style buildings. Like you've got this like very quaint architecture that's just not like the show buildings at Disney World at all. Like you are in a storybook village and the queues are very tiny. These are all attractions that have been here for years and years and years. So everything is small. I love it. It's like, I think it's probably my favorite Fantasyland, just because you have all the classic dark rides here. You've got Peter Pan's Flight, you've got Pinocchio, you've got Snow White, you've got Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
Like,
and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Yeah, I was like, I need to take a moment. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride actually exists in Disneyland, which is a long remembered attraction from Walt Disney World, which existed before the Winnie the Pooh attraction, and many diehard fans miss it, but it still exists at Disneyland. It's
bizarre.
It's a wild ride. You basically get drunk and end up in hell at the end.
It's wild to me that this attraction still exists, and I know like the cult Disney following around it, but like as an objective observer who didn't obviously grow up with this, I just remember being like, wait, did we just die in this?
Yeah.
And you're just in hell. And I'm like, okay, wait,
it's bizarre.
Traumatizing. If I were really little, I would be terrified of this ride. But I think it's so funny that it still exists. The plot is literally you are driving, you are inebriated, you get hit by a train, you die and end up in hell. And that's the whole thing.
Mr. Toad, man, that's the one. So
the juxtaposition is just hilarious because you go on that ride and then you walk out into Fantasyland and it's like the carousel is my elephant. And you're like, what fever dream just occurred? It's so funny. It's very romantic, that Fantasyland.
It is
medieval things and just how like small and we keep saying cozy, but how cozy it feels and how everything is just right there. I feel like you could just spend hours, and I feel like I typically do. We always will like dedicate a morning to just like doing all the Fantasyland stuff. We'll just go from dark ride to dark ride to dark ride. And I do love going on the teacups at Disneyland because outside, especially at night, because all of those fun lanterns at the Mad Tea Party glow in all the different colors and the Matterhorns in the background. And it's just like, that is the quintessential Disneyland moment, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes Alice and the Mad Hatter even would go on the teacups I've seen in the past, like with these wandering character sets, which is really cool. That's not something you see often. So
I've also seen Belle and Beast riding the carousel together in Fantasyland, and Gaston roaming around, like making jabs at Beast while they are on their little merry-go-round date. And it's just so freaking cute to see. And it makes me wish that Walt Disney World had moments like that, but
oh my gosh,
it's too funny. Again, it's so fun to see that just like the characters are just everywhere at any given time, and there's like the fact that there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it is what makes it magical, because you're just like riding the carousel and then you're like, oh my gosh, like, it's Belle.
That's what I think people envision Disney to be like. That's what it feels like in the commercials. Like you feel like you're living in a Disney commercial at Fantasyland, because all these random like whimsical things happen in real time, which is cool.
A couple of attractions that exist exclusively in Fantasyland at Disneyland, other than, you know, those dark rides we mentioned, the Storybook Land canal boats, which is just this like quaint little boat ride into the mouth of Monstro the whale, and then you emerge and there's all these little like dioramas of the different castles from the different princess stories. You know, you see Princess Jasmine's castle and you see Beast's castle. And
the funniest thing about those is when there's a duck. The ducks look like giant ducks.
And because you really are like shrunk down and you feel little, like you're in this boat, you've got a tour guide who's showing you around, and you go into the mouth of Monstro like Pinocchio, and all the castles are so small. So when there's a bird or a duck, it looks like this giant monstrous creature by comparison. But that, and then I think another attraction that makes me feel like a little kid is the Casey Jr. circus train.
I love that one.
So there's Dumbo the Flying Elephant, obviously a classic. And then the Casey Jr. Circus Train is definitely a kid-oriented attraction. You will feel like a really big person trying to get into some of those cars, but it's just so fun and whimsical. And I think Fantasyland to Disneyland, you just have to like give yourself over to being a kid. But the piece de la resistance of Fantasyland is weirdly, because I would not say this is the piece de la resistance at Walt Disney World, it's It's a Small World.
Oh my goodness. There's a lot to say about It's a Small World at Disneyland.
The facade is half the attraction to me. The outside, just that whole huge facade of the Mary Blair, like the iconic Mary Blair artwork, especially at Christmas time. I finally got to see that this year and I am in love. It just is covered in lights. They are on all evening. They do this like grandiose lighting, and the the Disneyland Railroad goes right past, so you actually get to see them up close. The attraction starts outside at Disneyland, which is not something that happens at Walt Disney World. Again, the fact that it doesn't rain that often in California makes it easier to do stuff like that. But there are all these fun, like whimsical animal topiaries. You start the attraction outside, and then just the structure of It's a Small World at Disneyland, it's so much bigger. There are more scenes. There are Disney characters, intermixed in the attraction itself that are styled like the Mary Blair dolls. So you'll see, Aladdin and Jasmine in the Middle East on their flying carpet up in the sky. You'll see Mowgli from the Jungle Book and Ariel under the sea, and just all of like Alice at her tea party and
Mulan in China.
And and you see Lilo and Stitch surfing in Hawaii, and it's so just fun to like watch people point them out along the way. And I honestly skip it at Walt Disney World, but at Disneyland is an absolute must do. Oh, by the way, the entire attraction is also overlaid at Christmas, not just the outside, the inside. They have a mix of Christmas carols that intermingle with the It's a Small World song. That's like, it's basically like the Mariah Carey extra festive edition of All I Want for Christmas Is You, but like It's a Small World edition, but it's extra festive. And all the scenes are overlaid with like snowmen, and it says like Happy Holidays, and just everything is just decorated for the season. And I just love it.
Yeah, It's a Small World, absolute must do. You just don't even know until you do it yourself. We're giving you the must do label on this one.
I'm just now realizing how huge Fantasyland at Disneyland is. It's so big.
It goes on for a long time.
We haven't even talked about the Matterhorn yet.
The Matterhorn's next. So there's a giant mountain in the middle of Disneyland, and you're thinking as a Walt Disney World person, like, is this like Expedition Everest? Is this another, Mountain of the Magic Kingdom deal? No, it is totally different. It is the Matterhorn, which is, it's a real place. Is it the Swiss Alps, I want to say?
Switzerland.
Yeah. So it fits this whole European charm that Fantasyland already has. And, you hear like the Swiss Alps music playing as the theming, and you get into these toboggan style roller coaster vehicles. And up until recently, there was no padding on those things. So it really kind of hurt your butt, but they added some pads, which is really nice. It definitely still throws you around a bit, but you go up and you see the Abominable Snowman Yeti. He looks different than the one at Animal Kingdom, and you go up, and then you just kind of go down the mountain, and lots of twists and turns, kind of unexpected, a bit jarring, a bit jerky, but I love the Matterhorn. I think it's a blast, especially since they added the padding. That has helped a lot. One of my favorite Disney smells, weirdly, too, is like going up the hill, which is a very niche one. It's a really fun ride. And I think for kids, especially who don't mind the jerkiness as much, and they're just starting to like roller coasters, it feels pretty epic.
It doesn't go upside down or anything crazy. So
no,
a little more tame.
It's kind of like the structure of Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom a little bit, but outdoors.
And that is like largely Fantasyland. I feel like there's so much to it. Now I know why I end up spending like half a day just in that part of the park. But worth noting, but not really diving into because it's about to change. Mickey's Toontown did last at Disneyland for much longer than it did at Walt Disney World. It was actually a full-blown land instead of a more temporary place like it was at the Magic Kingdom. And it had Donald's boat and Mickey and Minnie's house and a Roger Rabbit attraction that I low-key enjoyed.
I loved that. Wait, so what are they changing it to now?
They're changing it. I don't remember exactly what the land is going to be called, but it's kind of going to be based off of the newer Mickey and Friends cartoons. And I believe their version of Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway will be in that part of the park, which is very exciting because I love that attraction at Hollywood Studios. And I feel like fans only make Disneyland better. It is frumpy in all the best ways. And I'm excited to see it come to Disneyland. So that's kind of in progress right now. And speaking of progress, it's all around this place. I feel like it's time to go to our very last land.
It is. We're going to end our journey through Disneyland in Tomorrowland, of course. And there's quite a few notables here. Tomorrowland at Disneyland is structured very differently than Walt Disney World. It is lacking two important things in our hearts. There is no people mover here, and there is no carousel of progress. So sorry to disappoint. They did used to have it back, both of those back in the day. However, they no longer exist. But there are things that are fantastic here. So number one, we're just going to go right to the big thing. Space Mountain at Disneyland is so different than Walt Disney World, and I absolutely love it. I prefer it at Disneyland. Instead of being single file, you are in pairs. You have this really fun soundtrack. The track is very different. It's a lot smoother. It kind of, has those really intense curves. In the past, too, they've even done overlays for Space Mountain, like for Halloween. They'll do a Halloween overlay that's really spooky and scary. And they've, of course, had the original Space Mountain, and then they have Hyperspace Mountain, which is Star Wars themed. The queue area is really interesting as well. You're outdoors a lot and on the roof, and you go up these stairs and you oversee the loading area. It's just a very different feel to this Space Mountain than Walt Disney World. They feel like two different rides to me.
I love the overlays. I love Ghost Galaxy. I love Hyperspace Mountain. I think that it's just such a versatile attraction that takes on new stories really well. And I think when I think of Tomorrowland at Disneyland, I think of like a much bigger, like more open space, I guess, than Walt Disney World. I don't actually know that it is bigger, but it feels bigger. And I love that like Star Tours at Disneyland is so classic. I love that like the original one is still there.
And then there's, of course, Autopia, which is the equivalent of the Tomorrowland Indy Speedway at Walt Disney World. But Autopia is an extended version of it, I think, and a better quality version. I think you might notice a trend throughout this entire episode that we really think that the attractions are more so quality at Disneyland versus quantity. I think just because the parks have less that they need to take care of all the time, like they're really able to enhance the attractions that they have and make them really good. So I think Autopia is one of the examples of that. And then as well, we have the Finding Nemo submarine voyage in Disneyland, and we used to have a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea voyage at Walt Disney World and Disneyland, but now it's Finding Nemo themed, and you go into this submarine and it goes underwater and you see these different scenes from Finding Nemo. And I used to absolutely love this ride, and I know a lot of my friends would be claustrophobic on it. And I think now at my current age and everything, I would probably be a little bit claustrophobic too, but it was a really enchanting ride and very, very different than anything we had in Florida as well. And I thought just like being in a submarine was really cool. So
if you're claustrophobic or you just feel like being around people is icky now, it might not be the attraction for you.
Yeah. But at least seeing the water, like where the submarines go, like from above is actually really beautiful. The water just looks very blue and sparkly. And over in that area as well, something really interesting to note is the monorail station actually is in Tomorrowland. And the other one is in the downtown Disney area. So you can either catch it in Tomorrowland or downtown Disney, which is so different. It's really fun riding the monorail into or out of the park because you get to go over Fantasyland, you get to go over Tomorrowland and see everyone enjoying their day at Disneyland.
I think because there are only 2 parks at Disneyland, I just tend to spend more time enjoying the details and like letting myself move at a slower pace than I did when I was coming to Walt Disney World as a guest, you know, like once or twice a year, because you feel like there's so much to do in such, you know, in a week or however long you spend here. You can't really see or do it all at Disneyland because there are only 2 parks, because getting between the 2 parks is so easy and quick. I just feel like I have more time to actually enjoy it, to like pause and take in the details and like the little moments, just kind of zooming out and wrapping up and thinking more overarchingly. I just really feel so genuinely content there. I feel like I've been to Disneyland during some difficult seasons of my life. Despite all of that, the magic of that place has triumphed over all of those darker moments or, you know, harder spaces. And it really just has been such a place of joy and celebration for me, at least. And I just feel like there's truly something for everyone to find there. Not only something for everyone to enjoy, but Disneyland has a way of finding you, I think, and meeting you where you're at. And like an old friend, it knows exactly what you need. And it's there to give that to you, and not to get like super sappy, but I genuinely believe that to be true. And I cannot call it anything but magic. And I do believe it is because that was the park that Walt had such hand in. His spirit really does live on there. And I think it's absolutely worth the trip to Anaheim.
It really is. Disneyland is nothing short of magical. It brings out all of those childlike qualities within you, and you just get lost in these worlds of fantasy and adventure and tomorrow. And it's just an experience like none other. And it's a life-changing place. I remember visiting it and having moments where, you know, when I was 20 years old and I was like, I need to work here at some point in my life. And my life pivoted because of this place. And I met people that are still my friends to this day because of this place. And I've had experiences that are highlights of my life because of this place. And I have vacation memories that I got to experience with my mom or my friends or people who are important to me. Kristen and I are not the only people out there with stories like that. I think Walt's dream went from being a thought in his head to becoming a place that creates not only memories, but life pivots and actual real life magic. And it just touches your heart in a way that nowhere else in the world does. So it was so wonderful getting to dive into Disneyland with all of you. And it's amazing. Like, we finally made this episode, and it's exciting. It's so exciting to finally do. So we hope you guys enjoyed this as much as we did. It was a journey. There's so much in that. Everyone's like, it's such a small park. Well, let us tell you, there's a lot in that small park.
There is absolutely
small is relative.
There's so much history and story there that if you're really going to fully experience it, it actually isn't small at all. There's a lot going on. So thank you so much for being here, for coming to the happiest place on earth with us. Jess, I had such a good time. And now I feel like we need to go to Disneyland.
I know. I'm ready to go. I miss it so much. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you guys so much for listening today. Come on back next time for our adventure to California Adventure. We are going to go over to Disneyland's other park across the way. We're going to kind of do a similar style episode and go through all of the attractions, lands, tips, and tricks that we love, that we've discovered over the years and rediscovered. And it's going to be a blast. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of ReDIScover.
If you haven't already subscribed, hit that button and join the ReDIScover fam.
If you're like us and you have opinions about everything, leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. Your positivity inspires our creativity, and we love hearing from you.
Join us every other Tuesday for brand new episodes full of rediscovery.
And each month has its own unique theme, so be sure to catch them all.
Follow us on Instagram at positively.kristen and at jessicafay508.
And check out Jess's blog at theroadjesstraveled with 1l.com.
Until next time,
bye!